Programang ito ay rated SPG. Striktong patnubay at gabay ng magulang ang kailangan. Maaaring may masiselang tema, lengguwahe, karahasan, sexual, horror o droga na hindi angkop sa mga bata.
Perlas ng silanganan, alab ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay, lupang hinirang, tuyan ka ng magiting.
Prostitution in the Philippines is illegal, although somewhat tolerated, with the law enforcement being rare with regards to no sex workers. Penalties range out to life imprisonment for those involved in trafficking, which is covered by the Anti-Trafficking in Persons Act of 2003.
Do you want
A battered wife?
battered wife?
Battered?
You can stop.
Oh, I see. If I want a battered wife. You know what?
Prostitution is available through bars, karaoke bars, massage parlors, brothels, streetwalkers, and escort services.
You want massage? I have a massage.
I have one already, thank you.
I have a room.
I had massage already. They like you.
We're not just sisters. We are brothers.
Brothers?
The Young Adult Fertility and Sexuality Study conducted in 2002 by the University of the Philippines, Population Institute and Demographic Research and Development Foundation found that 19% of young males had paid for sex and 11% had received payment for sexual favors. In 2013, it was estimated that there were up to 500,000 prostitutes in the Philippines, from a population of roughly 97.5 million. Prostitution caters to both local customers and foreigners. Media attention tends to focus on those areas catering to sex tourism, primarily through bars staffed by bar girls. Cities where there is a high incidence of prostitution are Olongapo City, Angeles, Legazpi City in Albay, Pasay, and Subic Bay in Zambales, with the customers usually foreign businessmen from East Asian and Western nations. Prostitution in Olongapo City and Angeles was highly prominent during the time of the U.S. military in Subic Bay Naval Base and Clark Air Base respectively. When Mount Pinatubo, a volcano, erupted in 1991, it destroyed most of Clark Air Base and the United States closed it down in 1992.
I think I'm thinking straight. Prostitution started around Clark Air Base in Angeles since the early 1960s, when the base assumed importance because of the Vietnam War. During the 1970s, the main street of Olongapo City had no less than 30 girly bars catering to the wants of U.S. Navy troops visiting Subic Naval Base. The city acquired the pseudonym Sin City. The American authorities supported the testing of the prostitutes for STIs by the local health authorities. Without the licenses issued with these examinations, the prostitutes were prevented from working. Angeles and Olongapo health authorities passed on photographs of sex workers who had failed STI tests to the U.S. bases. The closure of the U.S. bases in these two places did not change the scenario much. It only changed the clientele. Fields Avenue near Clark continued to grow as a center of the sex tourism industry under the umbrella of the entertainment and hospitality industry. The girly bars at the Longapo were closed down in a major drive by the then Governor Jane Gordon. They were merely shifted, however, to the neighboring town of Barrio Barreto, which contains a series of at least 40 bars which act as prostitution centers.
Yung naman sa bibi ko, lasing din ako noon eh. Hindi ako, nirepata ako noon eh. Sabi ko, what's happened sa me? Sabi ko, ano nangyari sa akin? Sabi niya, iwan ko sa'yo. Sabi, nirep mo ko no. Umaga, tapos nadili na ako no. Tapos sinabi ko sa kanya, hindi siya naniniwala. Sabi ko lang naman nung di ko ginagamitan ng condom noon eh. Sabi ko sa kanya. Kaya yung par naman no, okay, sige, bahala ka. Umalis siya. Isang linggo siya doon sa kanila, tapos bumalik agad. Tapos doon ako sa kanya nag-stay. Tapos bumalik na naman siya, 1 month. Hindi talaga ako tataling uuwi na may pera. Kasi minsan umuwi ako ng pera, minsan umuwi meron. Hanggang 200, 300, hanggang 500 pataas lang yung pag may drinks ako eh. Tapos yun, minsan wala akong nauwi kahit ni piso.
Some women join the prostitution industry after they become single unwed mothers. The reasons for this vary: unpopularity of artificial contraception in the Philippines, inadequate sex education, delays in implementing birth control legislation, and the machismo attitude among many Filipino males. More than half of the children born every year in the Philippines are illegitimate, and the percentage of illegitimate children is rising at the age of nearly 2% annually. Per the Philippine Statistics Authority, in 2015, the Philippines had a poverty incidence of 26.3%. While this figure has been decreasing over the past years, this still is one of the reasons why girls and their families turn to prostitution to enable the family to maintain a certain level of lifestyle. A large number of girls who come to Angeles tend to be provincial, especially from Samar, Leyte, and Visayas, having seen their friends live a better life because their job in the prostitution industry.
Women and children involved in prostitution are vulnerable to rape, murder, and AIDS, as well as other sexually transmitted diseases. Survey of women working as masseuse indicated that 34% of them explained their choice of work as necessary to support poor parents, 8% to support siblings, and 28% to support husbands or boyfriends. More than 20% said the job was well paid, but only 2% said it was easy work, and only 2% claimed that to enjoy the work that they do. Over a third reported that they had been subject to violence or harassment, most commonly from the police, but also from city officials and gangsters. According to a survey conducted by the International Labor Organization, prostitution is one of the most alienating forms of labor. Over 50% of the women surveyed in the Philippines massage parlors said they carried out their work with a heavy heart, and 20% they said they were conscience-stricken because they still considered sex with customers as sin. Interviews with Philippine bar girls revealed that more than half of them felt nothing when they had sex with a client, and the remainder said the transaction saddened them. President Rodrigo Duterte's war on drugs since 2016 has been used by some members of the police to harass women in prostitution and extort money or sexual services from them.
Sex trafficking in the Philippines is human trafficking for the purpose of sexual exploitation and slavery that occurs in the Republic of the Philippines. Human trafficking and the prostitution of children is a significant issue in the Philippines. Often controlled by the organized crime syndicates, human trafficking is a crime against humanity. Filipino citizens, primarily women and girls, have been sex trafficked to the various provinces of the Philippines, as well as other countries in Asia and different continents. Some are trafficked using students, intern, and exchange program visas. Children and people in poverty and with low educational levels are vulnerable.
Pareho po tayong mga tao. Hindi po tayo ibagay or hayop na pwedeng gamitin lang sa pansarili.
Other vulnerable groups include indigenous peoples and those displaced by typhoons. Sex traffic victims are deceived and forced into prostitution, marriage, pregnancy, and unfree labor. They are threatened and tied up or locked up and experience physical and psychological trauma. Many suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder and nightmares. They contract sexually transmitted disease from rapes and abuse, malnutrition, and poor living conditions, including rooms with little ventilation, are common. Cybersex or online sex trafficking and victims being in pornography is a significant problem. Traffickers use many different internet and social media sites and apps, as well as email to lure victims. The scale of sex trafficking in the Philippines is difficult to know because of the dearth of data. Corruption is pervasive. The government has been criticized for poor anti-sex trafficking law enforcement in some areas and not providing enough victims protection and rehabilitation services. In an effort to deal with the problem, the Philippines passed RA 9208, the Anti-Trafficking in Person Act of 2003, a penal law against human trafficking, sex tourism, sex slavery, and child prostitution.
Okay.